Hello everyone, I'm Brad and welcome back to Watch, Rate, Heart. And it is Friday, which means it's time for the Watched List. This is where I discuss the films I've watched this week and my feelings about them. This week I'm going to be reviewing two documentaries that are on the Letterboxd 250 documentaries of all time. Then I'll be reviewing two films from 1995. Now that we've got introductions out of the way, let's get this started.
In a cold world, all the watches started to freeze. The sun came and went between blizzards and gusts, which erased all bearings. In this world lived a fire, and in this fire, two lovers found a home.
Let's begin with Fire of Love, a documentary from National Geographic about volcanologists Katja and Maurice Croft, narrated by Miranda July and directed by Sara. This has a Letterboxd score of 4.1 out of 5, and it is ranked 118 in the top 250 documentary films. It holds a Rotten Tomatoes score of 98% fresh, and it was nominated in 2023 for Best Documentary Feature. The first thing I have to discuss positively in this film are the visuals. The visuals of the volcanoes, the eruptions, the smoke, everything regarding the volcanoes are stunning. They are amazing to watch, especially when you start to see footage of the earth separating and you see the red lava coming out. I thought that was amazing to look at. And there are other natural phenomena that are in this movie that are just gorgeous to look at, just amazing to watch. I also like how the film runs at a very brisk 90 minutes. It really just gets to the point of the film, which is just showing this couple going through all these volcanoes and what they are recording. And honestly, the crafts are interesting for what they do involving volcanoes. I like when they discuss their work and what they are doing while they're on site at these volcanoes. But the film decides to put a big focus on their romance, their relationship, but there really isn't much in the film involving their relationship. I don't think there should be, to be completely honest. I think if it had footage of them canoodling or kissing or stuff like that, I think it would feel kind of odd in this film. But the fact that the film tries to make this into like a lovers that just so happen to both be volcanologists, I think is interesting when you start the movie, but as the film heads towards the conclusion, there really isn't much about the romance in this. I really think they should have just said, this is just a couple that are volcanologists, they're a great team, and here they go. And I think that would have been just fine. Overall, I'm going to rate this a 3.5 out of 5. These stunning visuals are what I think are the best thing about this film. When you watch certain things happening, the explosions, the lava flow, the earth separating with the lava, like they are beautiful to watch. They just are, again, stunning to look at. And I also like how the film doesn't linger too long. It's about a little bit under 90 minutes. But I will say, as much as I do like the Crofts in this film, I think the film focusing on a romance angle just doesn't really work in this. But despite that, I still think this is a very good-looking and very interesting documentary. So again, 3.5 out of 5 for me for Fire of Love. Alright, in every episode, I not only give you my opinion, but I also give the opinion of people in Letterboxd. Let's go with this Letterboxd review from Shane Grant. Shane gives us 3 stars out of 5, and Shane seems a little bit negative, but overall he does like it. He says, this almost feels like a fashion film for hipsters. Beautiful shots of volcanoes with a couple of kooks, an equally kooky narrator, great soundtrack, and vibrant, lively editing. But that's it. The movie is mostly montage because there's no real plot or character arc here. The central relationship is beautiful, but I don't get much more here that I didn't get from the trailer. There's a few tidbits of volcanology to glean, but not a lot. I kind of agree with Shane here. I kind of bristle a little bit on the fashion film for hipsters thing. The film is beautiful. I wouldn't call these people kooks necessarily. I think they're just passionate about their job, which I guess a lot of people who are passionate about something can actually seem a little weird to some. I think honestly me and Shane kind of feel the same way about the film in a number of ways. I guess I don't like how he said it, but I do agree with him for the most part. There really isn't much of a character arc here, which is why I don't think the romance really worked for me all that well. So we're going to move on to Saren here. Saren has us at a 3.5 stars out of 5, and Saren says, Fire of Love is a documentary about a topic I knew very little about. At its center are Katja and Maurice, who share their love for volcanoes and each other. The documentary is visually striking with an artistic feel as Katja and Maurice wander around in their red beanies. And I got this last review here from Lucy. Lucy gives this 3.5 stars out of 5. And Lucy says, when Tilda Swinton and John C. Reilly reunite for this biopic and both earn Oscars for kissing near erupting volcanoes. Yeah. I could see that too, actually. But does John C. Reilly know French? I bet Tilda Swinton does. She more than likely does in about 7 other languages. But I don't think John C. Reilly can do French, so we're going to have to get a French actor who can probably do that with Tilda Swinton. But I like this review. I thought it was funny and kind of on point. Next is the acclaimed documentary from Terry Zwigoff called Crumb about the comic book artist and writer Robert Crumb. It has a Letterboxd score of 4.2 out of 5, which makes it ranked 81 in Letterboxd's top 250 documentaries. It has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 95%, and it's on the Criterion Collection. I'm pretty conflicted about Crumb here. I will state that it is an in-depth and starkly honest examination of the artist Robert Crumb, warts and all, and honestly, majority of him is all warts in this one. It's a fairly disturbing kind of film, but I also see the ironic humor in it in some spots. But I can say right now, this is not for everybody, especially if you do not like Robert Crumb and his work. Like, I don't like his work. I don't like his art. I think it's kind of disgusting, to be absolutely honest with you. And I see where you can derive humor from it, but I don't find it all that funny. The movie plays itself as darkly comic. You have to be really dark to find some of what is in this film funny. And like I said, it gets incredibly uncomfortable in some spots in the film, especially towards the end. I think the question I have, and I'm still debating with myself, I watched it a day before the recording, and I'm still wrapped up in my head asking, is this film a celebration of Crumb? An examination of his character? Both? What is this? Like, I think it's both to a certain extent, but I'm not sure whether it's celebrating him or not. I think in some ways it's celebrating his art, but not him as a person. Hopefully. My God, that would be disgusting. I have to say, I can't deny that this is actually a really well-made documentary. Terry Zwigoff did a really good job adding more depth to the character and to the focus of the film, and also providing more context from people who do not like Crumb and his work. So I have to give him credit on that. As for a rating, I'm going to give this 3 stars out of 5. I know that's lower than what most say, and it's definitely lower than the average for Letterboxd, but I can admit that it's a good documentary, but I gotta be honest, I'm not entirely interested in Crumb as a person and his art. I understand that he has talent, but I just... I was not really interested in him at all, and that interest waned and waned as the film went on. But I have to admit, it's a well-made documentary, so for that, I'll give it 3 stars out of 5. Now, we're going to go to the Letterboxd community, but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to highlight only one review. This is from Vic Zerbis. Vic gives it a 1.5 star out of 5. I'm going to read most of it here. Vic Zerb said, I understand why this is celebrated as a good documentary. The talking points are interesting, and the direction, treatment, coverage is cool, but I don't understand how it is impossible to engage with this film without feeling visceral rage. Watching Robert Crumb laugh while his brother talks about molesting women, him showing no remorse when his ex-girlfriend tried to hold him accountable for his actions, posing with women in a blatantly sexist photo shoot, no thank you. He continues, I understand this all fits within their family's context and their era more broadly, but I don't understand why this movie doesn't go further into critiquing the harmful elements of his artwork, sexist behaviors, or attitudes. The film seems very flippant and somewhat glamorizes the dude's success. I am sick of celebrating male genius, especially when that genius is actively racist and sexist. Let's not forget this wonderful... I'm not repeating that. I'm not repeating that. Basically, Robert Crumb says that he has a lot of hostilities towards women. And basically, Vic ends it with, it's like, if you know you hate women, maybe go to therapy and work on your beliefs. It's probably better than doing little cartoons of male characters. Yeah, all right. I'm not saying that either. Okay, so there's a reason why I'm just going to do it with this one review from Vic here. And I'm not going to attack Vic because a lot of what Vic is saying, I agree with. And that's where I was having my struggles with this film. I also wonder if Vic's mentality here is, if the guy is a complete creep, should we be focusing on him? Should we be having an in-depth conversation or a documentary about him unless it's overly negative? Here's the thing. I think what makes the documentary good is that it shows all sides of him. I think it also shows all the negative sides, pretty much. And I have to give credit to Terry Zwigoff here that he does this. He does not shy away from a lot of the things that he was doing in his comics, but he also shows how bad of a person he is. On the one hand, I kind of see where Vic is coming from, but on the other hand, I don't think the movie shies away from that. Does it celebrate him? I mean, unfortunately, Robert Crumb is a guy who was celebrated as a profound artist at the time that he was doing these comics. And I think until his death, he still was to a certain extent. But I think if this was glamorizing him, if this was a movie that was showing a positive outlook on him, it would have shown none of the stuff on the sexism and the racism stuff. I think Zwigoff does a good job of showing that, yeah, he's got some deep issues. As part of the film as well, when it comes to the family context and dynamic, I think the film tried to correlate like the abuse that he got from his father to why his family is so messed up. And with mental health as complex as it is, I can kind of see that, but I think we should also fault the mother, because it just seems like the mother kind of condones what her boys do, and especially with Robert. But I also want to point out one thing that I'm surprised Vic didn't point out, because I think with what Vic is saying, this would have hammered in the point quite clearly. Who wasn't in the documentary? And that is Robert Crumb's sisters. They refused to be in the documentary. I'm going to read this. This is a Google AI overview as to why Robert Crumb's sisters did not participate in the documentary. One threatened the filmmaker if she as so much mentioned her name in the film. The other sister was more polite, declined to be interviewed. There really wasn't specific reasons for their refusal, but it was stated in one source it was due to embarrassment. And on top of this, the AI profile says that Crumb was actually reluctant to have the film delve into his family life, but he allowed it, possibly believing the documentary would not be finished or even widely seen. He was reportedly upset when Sony Pictures picked it up and the film became successful. So I think even Robert Crumb realizes how much of an asshole he looks like in this film. I don't disagree with Vic at all in this. I understand why Vic can look at this and goes, why would I want to watch a movie that shows all this shit about a guy, but also say how much of a great artist he is? I think that was kind of the point of the movie, that with some artists, you have the brilliance, but you have the really fucked up parts about him as well that you have to contend with. I give it 3 stars because I think it's still a good documentary, but I definitely understand where Vic is coming from here. And there are some things in movies that I've watched where I could be kind of enjoying it. I could be either here or there, and then one element just offends me and goes, no thank you. And I think that one with me was from a couple years ago, Licorice Pizza. When I watched that movie and the end, and I was like, what is this? It's like, no, I am, Like, that turned me off so much, I ended up not liking the film. I understand where Vic's coming from. I agree with mostly what Vic is coming from, but I think the film did a good job in showing all sides of Robert Crumb. But if you don't like what you're seeing, you don't like it, you can not like it, and that's perfectly fine. Perfectly understandable in that, too. I just think the film does a good job just showing who he is. But I think what Zwigoff did was show all sides of Crumb. For that, I think this deserves a recommendation that you should see it. I have to thank Vic Zerbst on his review. When I saw this, I'm like, okay, I have to just use this one because Vic makes a lot of great points. A lot of it that I actually agree with, but I have to say that I think that was kind of the point of the film. But again, if you don't like it, you don't have to like it. That's perfectly fine, and I completely understand. Let's move forward to films from 1995. We have Living in Oblivion, starring Steve Buscemi, Catherine Keener, and Dermot Mulroney, directed by Tom DiCillo. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.9 out of 5, and also has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 86% fresh. And this movie is basically 3 scenes and 3 acts, and I think it kind of works well. This is basically about a director who's doing an independent feature, and honestly, I think the film is pretty funny. A lot of the characters are, there's the neurotic director, which is played by Steve Buscemi, and there is Catherine Keener's character, who's a very emotional and very unsure actress. There's a whole bunch of other interesting characters as well throughout the film. I don't hate any of the characters in the film. I think it's actually very good. The highlights are Catherine Keener and Steve Buscemi. Buscemi is great in this film, but I really think the best person is Catherine Keener in this performance, and it's a performance that I'm a little surprised didn't get any award contention way back when. This was a very good performance by her. I also like the fact that this is a very short film. This is about 90 minutes. So each act is about roughly 20 to 30 minutes. I think all 3 acts are good. They are funny in some spots, but they are also interesting in some spots. I do have a problem with the structure of the film in one aspect, though. It's kind of confusing. I think I read somewhere that the director wanted to do this because it shows the chaotic nature of filmmaking, and I don't think it does that great of a job. It just is confusing for confusion's sake. I also think it's kind of pointless to do it the way they did. I think it would have been a lot more interesting just 3 days of that shoot and it going forward from there. And it kind of is that way, but it kind of isn't. They structure every act as the end of a dream, which I'm like, that's kind of weird. But it was funny at first, but then after the last one, I was like, okay, fine. Whatever. But as a score, I'm going to give this 3.5 out of 5. I think this is a very good movie. It's probably one of the better movies about filmmaking, in my opinion. It's very funny. I like the performances. Buscemi is great, but I think Catherine Keener is actually really good in this movie. And I like the fact that it's a very short film as well, and it just stays on point to what it's doing. I don't really like when the film just says, oh, it's a dream, and doesn't really do anything with it. So I was a little annoyed by that. But overall, 3.5 stars out of 5 for me for Living in Oblivion. All right, so I got my opinion down. Let's see what the Letterboxd community thinks about this film. I have James here who gives it 4.5 stars out of 5 with a heart. And James says, why doesn't Steve Buscemi have more leading roles? Because he's actually so incredible in this. I don't think he's incredible, but I think he's great. And I have to agree. I think he should get more leading roles. And here is our second one here. This is from Saren. Saren gives it 3 stars out of 5. And Saren says, if I was Steve Buscemi's character, I would have had 5 more mental breakdowns. Let's get into the third one. This is from Shane Grant. Shane Grant gives us 4 stars out of 5, and Shane says, I had a lot of fun with this. Definitely some Jim Jarmusch vibes, and it almost feels like a parody of 90s indie filmmaking, but everyone's giving top performances, and it has a funny and unique structure. Buscemi is always great, but this is a showcase for Keener. I absolutely agree on that one. It's definitely a showcase for Keener. And finally, we have... oh boy, I should have looked at the name. This last one is from Jizz Monkey. He gives it 3 stars out of 5, and the monkey says, overplays its hand, but worth watching if only for the dream sequence featuring Peter Dinklage realistically playing a dwarf. Finally, our last 1995 film is Mi Familia, also known as My Family, starring Jimmy Smits, S.A. Morales, and Edward James Olmos, co-written and directed by Gregory Nava. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.7 out of 5, and it has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 79% fresh, and it was also nominated for an Academy Award for Best Makeup. And I gotta be honest, when I started watching Mi Familia, I was a little skeptical because the first 30 minutes or so were kind of bad. The first 30 minutes is basically the origins of the parents, and it was kind of corny and way too melodramatic. So after that portion, I was like, oh no, I'm going to have another hour and a half of this. This might not be good. But I will say, when it focuses on the kids, it does get a lot better. So the film focuses on 2 of the kids, which is S.A. Morales' Chucho and Jimmy Smith's, well, Jimmy. And the film gets a lot better when it starts to focus on the kids. And really, the highlights of the film are S.A. Morales and Jimmy Smits. But I also have to say that Eduardo Lopez Rojas is actually great as a foundational performance. He plays the father in most of the film, and I think he does a good job. It's not a showy performance, but it's a performance that I think really helps cement the film in a specific standard that I thought was really good. But like I said, the film does come off as melodramatic. Well, I would say really melodramatic in some parts, but I think the performances really carry the rest of the film. And if you can handle the melodrama and some of the corniness, I would say definitely give Mi Familia a shot. I give Mi Familia 3.5 stars out of 5. Again, I think the performances are what carry this film, especially Jimmy Smits and S.A. Morales. Even though it's a little melodramatic and a little corny, I think it actually works in its favor towards the end of the film. So I would definitely say if you're interested, check it out. So again, I give this 3.5 stars out of 5. And finally, let's see what the Letterboxd community thinks about this film. We have Jose Ruales. I am probably getting that name wrong. He gives it 4 stars, and he says, love the cast, really great pacing too. You know what? I'll give him that. I was not bored at all after the first 30 minutes of the film. So I guess I would say yes. The film does have good pacing. And the cast, especially the two leads when it comes to those two sections, are very good. Now, on the opposite end, we have Juan A. Ramirez. He gives this film 1 star. And he says, the 90s sure did a lot for the high school history teacher going through a messy divorce who needs a break and plays a half-remembered movie for their class industry. Wow, that's a very specific memory. He's not wrong, though. The kind of story that could only be told by someone at least 2 generations removed from their ancestry, who can't be bothered to check their grandparents' fanciful stories or investigate any of what gave their life and country any significance beyond romanticized nostalgia. I'm sure people will find this charming or relatable or whatever, but it ain't me. I've long had a problem with this type of hyper-foreignized speech that jams in as many vocab words as humanly possible. It always ends up with lines like, back in Mexico, my abuela and I walked through the barrio to get some tamales on the way to La Escuela. there's Spanglish, and then there's this Dora the Explorer ass nonsense. Anyway, this was boring as hell. I kind of see his point. I really do. And maybe because I'm not part of that ethnicity, I found the film kind of charming in the end. But I can see where he's coming from here. The film does use a lot of this kind of speech. But I guess if you are annoyed by that, you're annoyed by that no matter what. So that's a good one. Oh, man. And finally, we have Sam Fay. Sam Fay gives us 3.5 stars out of 5 with a heart. And Sam just lists it like this. What Sam liked: it was a very funny, poignant immigrant story. Second half of this film I liked much more. The story of Carlito and his father was great. What Sam didn't like: first half is very silly and melodramatic. I agree. I was laughing at parts I'm not sure were meant to be funny. J-Lo thinks she's in a telenovela. Well, I've never watched a telenovela. I agree with Sam on the first half being kind of silly and melodramatic, but I did like S.A. Morales in the Chucho character. But I would say Jimmy Smith's character and story is a lot better. I will say that Sam is right on that, at least in my eyes. Alright guys, and that is it for this episode of Watch, Rate, Heart. Before I go, let me ask you a question. What are the best documentaries you have ever seen? Me? I kind of don't count this because of the type of documentary it is, but honestly, Showa is probably the best documentary I've ever seen. But again, I don't count it because it's a 4-part, 8-hour documentary. So it's more like a mini-series to me, but for some reason it's counted as a movie documentary. I mean, I love Showa, so if I'm not going to count that, I would have to say it's either Hoop Dreams or Capturing the Freedmans. I would have to say Hoop Dreams, actually. Capturing the Freedmans is really good, but Hoop Dreams, I think, is the best one I have seen. But let me know in the comments, and also let me know what you think of my reviews. You can follow me at Letterboxd and X at Watch, Rate, Heart, and please like and subscribe if you enjoy it and share it with your friends. I'm Brad from Watch, Rate, Heart. Thank you for watching, and remember, we all watch and rate movies, but you give them the heart that makes them live forever.